Pelican Bay, world's deadliest inmates and gang secrets exposed. Inside the walls of Pelican Bay State Prison, some of the most dangerous men in America live in isolation. Secrets, violence, and gang power are hidden behind concrete and razor wire. Hit subscribe, like, and comment if you dare to uncover the truth. The morning fog rolled in thick over Crescent City, California, settling over the razor-sharp barbed wire and reinforced concrete of Pelican Bay State Prison. From a distance, the facility looked calm, almost serene, a quiet island of incarceration against the backdrop of the Pacific Ocean. But inside, the air carried a tension that only those who had stepped inside the Security Housing Unit, SHU, could understand. This was the prison's most notorious enclave, a place designed to isolate the state's deadliest gang leaders and violent offenders. The SHU was a labyrinth of narrow corridors, tiny cells, and sound-proofed doors. Inmates spent up to 23 hours a day confined to these cages. Surveillance cameras lined every hallway, and guards patrolled with measured steps, eyes scanning constantly for any hint of trouble. According to news reports and court filings, inmates here often ran criminal enterprises from their cells, issuing orders to street gangs hundreds of miles away. One such inmate was identified in court documents only as a composite figure, Inmate X, a pseudonym to protect privacy. He was known for orchestrating a network of robberies and drug trafficking operations from inside his cell. According to reports, his communications were carried out through coded letters, visitors, and lawyers' briefcases, methods carefully monitored by authorities. Despite the high security, the gang influence within Pelican Bay remained pervasive, highlighting the extraordinary lengths inmates went to maintain power from behind bars. The prison had already seen decades of controversy. In 1992, inmate Von Dorch suffered severe burns after guards subjected him to scalding water during a disciplinary procedure, a fact documented in court filings. Dorch's case became emblematic of the criticisms against Pelican Bay, allegations of excessive force, human rights violations, and the extreme psychological toll of solitary confinement. Human rights advocates argued that the SHU conditions, while designed to control the most dangerous individuals, often crossed into cruelty. The day began like any other, but tensions were palpable. Across the SHU, Inmate X had received a visitor, a lawyer delivering a briefcase filled with documents and news clippings. Guards monitored from a distance, noting every movement. Inside his cell, X meticulously sorted through the materials, pausing occasionally to scribble notes on scraps of paper. Each letter, each page of court filings, was a potential puzzle piece in his ongoing strategy to influence events outside the prison walls. Meanwhile, another inmate, a young man identified only as Inmate Y for privacy, sat silently in the corner of his cell. He had been transferred from a medium-security facility after participating in gang-related assault. According to prison reports, Y was under constant observation because of suspected links to ongoing gang activity. Yet even under strict surveillance, small contraband, notes, altered paperwork, and even small tools often found its way into cells, smuggled with ingenuity born from desperation and fear. Outside the SHU, the administrative offices buzzed with activity. Correctional officers reviewed surveillance footage from the previous night. A small incident had occurred in cell block C. A fight between two inmates was quickly quelled, but the cause remained unconfirmed, according to internal reports. These minor eruptions, seemingly routine to staff, were often the first warning signs of deeper conflicts, potentially connected to the sprawling gang networks the SHU housed. The day's schedule was relentless. Inmates received meals in small, staggered rotations. Guards escorted them individually for showers or legal visit. Even in these brief moments of movement, the potential for violence or intelligence gathering was ever present. Every action is calculated, a former correctional officer recalled in an interview, Even the smallest conversation can have ramifications outside these walls. By mid-afternoon, the fog had lifted, revealing the Pacific coastline stretching endlessly beyond the prison. From this vantage point, the isolation of Pelican Bay was apparent, a fortress against the world. Yet inside, invisible lines of power, loyalty, and fear wove a network as complex as any organized crime syndicate. Each inmate, whether awaiting trial, serving life sentences, or confined for decades, was part of a precarious ecosystem maintained through intimidation, alliances, and the constant presence of violence. As evening approached, tensions inside the SHU reached a boiling point. Inmate X's cellmate, another composite figure for privacy, Inmate Z, had been acting erratically for weeks. According to internal prison records, he had refused meals, ignored guards' commands, and was reportedly talking to unseen entities. Whether this was a mental health issue or a deliberate psychological strategy to unsettle other inmates remained unconfirmed. Guards, aware of the fragility of control, implemented heightened surveillance for the night. Cameras were adjusted, cell doors checked, and patrols increased. Meanwhile, Inmate X, aware of the growing unrest, began writing coded messages on scraps of paper, a meticulous attempt to manage his influence and maintain authority within the confined hierarchy. Every movement, every whispered word, was a test of control in a system designed to strip power but inadvertently allowed it to persist behind walls and bars. The night settled over Pelican Bay, cloaking the facility in darkness. Lights flickered in the SHU corridors, casting long shadows that danced against the concrete walls. Outside, the wind carried the distant crash of Pacific waves. Inside, secrets brewed, alliances shifted, and the game of power continued, hidden from public view, yet profoundly shaping the lives of those both inside and outside the prison. Late at night, a single guard noticed a folded piece of paper slip under the crack of cell 7. The contents were unclear at first, just a scribbled note, but upon closer inspection, it hinted at a planned coordination between inmates across multiple SHU units. Whether it was real or a bluff remained unconfirmed. The guard's hand trembled as he radioed the control room. A potential storm was quietly gathering behind the walls of Pelican Bay. Last night, a single note hinted at a plan brewing in the SHU. Tonight, the tension escalates. Inmates maneuver, alliances shift, and Pelican Bay's walls hold more secrets than anyone outside can imagine. Hit subscribe, like, and comment to uncover the truth. The night deepened over Pelican Bay, cloaking the security housing unit in near-total darkness. Each cell flickered with a faint, institutional glow cast from the tiny barred windows near the ceiling. Guards walked their usual loops, footsteps echoing through concrete corridors, alert to every sound. Despite isolation protocols, a network of influence thrived quietly among the cells. What appeared silent on the surface was a hive of calculation and covert activity. Inmate X, whose influence stretched through multiple units, now acted cautiously. The note found under cell 7 the previous night had sparked whispers among the staff, a potential orchestration of contraband exchange and coordination of gang operations. According to internal prison reports, these types of notes had occasionally led to incidents, though most were intercepted before escalation. Yet the possibility remained chilling. Even in a system designed to limit communication, inmates had proven time and again that ingenuity and desperation could bend the rules. Across the unit, Inmate Y, transferred recently from another facility, was becoming a person of interest. His cell contained contraband unconfirmed by official inspection logs, reportedly smuggled through visitors or legal correspondence. While guards exercised extreme caution, these methods highlighted a recurring tension at Pelican Bay. The paradox of isolation meant to prevent crime while inadvertently creating a high-stakes chessboard for the inmates' ingenuity. By mid-morning, the prison's daily routines unfolded with precision, meals delivered in small, staggered intervals, showers escorted individually, limited recreational time carefully monitored. Yet behind these routines, the undercurrent of fear and manipulation persisted. According to news reports and court filings, some inmates, especially gang leaders, continued to wield influence over criminal enterprises outside the prison. Orders for illicit activities were reportedly sent through coded letters, attorney briefcases, and seemingly innocuous paperwork. Inmate X and his allies used coded symbols in ordinary documents, a method verified in prior investigations. Guards and surveillance officers had learned to spot patterns, but gaps remained. Even with the cameras and checks, a determined inmate could still maneuver, a former correctional officer stated in an interview. Within these walls, trust was currency, and betrayal a constant threat. The afternoon brought tension to a new level. A verified incident occurred in cell block D. A fight broke out between two inmates affiliated with rival gangs. One was hospitalized for non-life-threatening injuries, according to official prison reports. While minor on the surface, these skirmishes often acted as signals, establishing dominance and testing alliances. Even isolated, gang culture thrived in shadows, leveraging fear and influence to maintain control. Meanwhile, administrative staff were reviewing security footage from the previous night. The scribbled note under Cell 7 was analyzed frame by frame, though the contents remained partially indecipherable. It hinted at a coordination plan across multiple SHU units. Whether this plan was operational or a bluff remained unconfirmed. This uncertainty created palpable tension among guards and inmates alike. Every interaction, every whispered conversation could be part of a larger strategy. Inside inmate Z's cell, the atmosphere was different yet equally tense. Z, suffering from mental health strain, had begun refusing meals and pacing obsessively. According to internal psychological evaluations, his behavior represented both a potential risk to himself and a potential manipulation tactic to unsettle fellow inmates. In the SHU, mental fragility and power dynamics intersected dangerously. Inmates like Z became unpredictable wildcards, capable of tipping the balance of influence in subtle but profound ways. Even the yard offered no respite. During brief outdoor time, inmates moved under constant surveillance. Any unusual gathering or conversation could trigger a lockdown. According to news reports, Pelican Bay's architecture was designed for control, small yards divided into sections with guards stationed to prevent unsanctioned interactions. Yet, even with these precautions, inmates found ways to exchange messages, whether through subtle gestures, notes hidden in laundry, or coded words in casual speech. As night fell again, the prison settled into a tense, watchful silence. Guards monitored the corridors and cells more intensively than usual. Inmate X, aware that the note from the previous night had drawn scrutiny, began communicating through smaller, safer channels. The hierarchy inside the SHU was delicate. One misstep could result in punishment, retaliation, or a complete shift in power dynamic. Suddenly, the SHU's monitoring screens caught a small movement, a folded piece of paper being passed between cells. It was subtle, almost imperceptible on camera, but enough to trigger an immediate response from staff. Whether this was a continuation of the earlier note or a completely separate action remained unconfirmed, but the implications were clear. Even the tightest security could not entirely prevent inmates from exerting influence. It was evident that Pelican Bay's SHU was more than a prison. It was a high-stakes arena of strategy, influence, and constant vigilance. Guards and staff were forced to react not only to violent outbursts but to subtle manipulations and psychological games. Inmate X, Inmate Y, and even Z had become players in a complex web of power, their moves shaping events both inside and beyond the prison walls. Late in the evening, a security officer discovered another suspicious note tucked beneath a cell door, this one referencing a plan that spanned multiple blocks, with coded symbols partially decipherable. Whether it indicated real coordination or was merely a bluff remained unconfirmed, but the potential for escalation was undeniable. The SHU's walls held secrets that only insiders could begin to understand, and the storm brewing inside Pelican Bay was far from over. The tension inside Pelican Bay's SHU is reaching a boiling point. Inmates maneuver, rivalries flare, and every whispered word could spark chaos. Stay tuned as secrets and strategies collide. The SHU was a maze of shadowed corridors and locked steel doors. Inmate X, still meticulously tracking communications across multiple units, now faced increasing pressure from rival factions. Guards had stepped up surveillance after the discovery of the two notes, but these measures only heightened the paranoia among inmates. According to internal reports, such escalations often serve to embolden the most cunning prisoners, who thrive in high-stakes psychological environments. Inmate Y, recently transferred from another facility, had begun forming subtle alliances. Using gestures, coded messages, and the occasional brief interaction with legal counsel, he was quietly consolidating influence among younger inmates. These strategies are consistent with documented gang operations inside maximum security prisons, where inmates leverage minimal communication to maintain outside network. While authorities could monitor obvious activity, these covert manipulations remained largely unverified, according to reports. Across the SHU, inmate Z's erratic behavior persisted. Mental health staff had flagged him as a high-risk destabilizer in prior evaluations. His pacing, sudden outbursts, and refusal to follow minor orders created unease among nearby inmates. Court filings and human rights reports note that such behavior, while challenging to manage, often shifts the balance of power within isolated prison populations, particularly in units designed to house high-risk offenders. By mid-afternoon, Pelican Bay's staff implemented a series of lockdown procedures, verified in prison administrative reports, following a minor altercation in cell block B. Two inmates from opposing factions engaged in a brief physical confrontation, quickly diffused by guards. These incidents, though minor, act as early indicators of shifting allegiances and potential larger conflicts within the SHU. The subtle maneuvering was almost invisible to the casual observer. Notes tucked beneath cell doors, coded gestures in the recreation yard, and carefully phrased conversations with legal counsel allowed gang leaders to exert influence from within isolation. According to reports, even under extreme control measures, Pelican Bay's most resourceful inmates managed to maintain lines of command with associates on the outside. Meanwhile, staff reviewed surveillance footage from multiple units. They observed patterns suggesting potential coordination between cells, folded papers passed surreptitiously, gestures exchanged across small distances, and other subtle cues. Whether this indicated a legitimate organized plan or merely posturing remained unconfirmed, yet the mere possibility forced administrators to escalate monitoring and precautionary protocols. Inside one of the SHU cells, inmate X carefully prepared another set of messages. Each was coded, referencing previous incidents and potential alliances. Legal counsel meetings became brief opportunities for information transfer, carefully monitored by guards but historically documented as a method used by inmates in Pelican Bay to maintain influence. The SHU, intended to neutralize power and limit communication, paradoxically created an environment where only the most patient and cunning prisoners could thrive. Inmate Y, observing X's methods, began experimenting with his own channels. Notes were exchanged discreetly during recreation periods, laundry runs, or through subtle signals to staff, behavior consistent with previous reports of SHU gang influence. Guards remained vigilant, but the combination of minimal human contact and psychological pressure allowed these networks to persist, sometimes undetected for weeks or months. By late evening, tensions reached a subtle peak. Inmate Z's erratic movements became a focal point, drawing attention from nearby inmates who interpreted them as signals or tests. According to internal evaluations, such behavior often triggers temporary alliances or shifts in inmate hierarchy. Even within a facility designed for maximum control, the SHU's population continuously adapted, leveraging fear, unpredictability, and the smallest opportunities to assert power. Security teams noted a pattern emerging across multiple blocks: folded notes, gestures, and coded phrases suggesting possible coordination for future activity. Whether this coordination was a concrete plan or a bluff intended to manipulate perception remained unconfirmed. Nevertheless, the staff treated the situation seriously, increasing patrols, reviewing camera angles, and implementing additional precautions to preempt escalation. As night fell, the SHU became eerily quiet. Lights flickered across the concrete corridors, shadows stretching long and ominous. Inmates retreated to their cells, but the network of influence was still active, unseen, unbroken, and dangerously strategic. The calm was deceptive. A guard noticed a small, folded note under cell 12. When examined, it contained cryptic symbols referencing multiple units and times, potential coordination between inmates. Whether this signaled a brewing conflict or a psychological bluff remained unconfirmed, but the warning was clear. Pelican Bay's SHU had its own invisible hierarchy, and tonight, the stakes had just escalated. Pelican Bay's walls hide more than just prisoners; they conceal strategies, rivalries, and secrets that could ignite chaos. Tonight, tensions erupt, and the prison staff must respond before it's too late. The morning fog over Crescent City seemed thicker than usual, creeping through the razor wire perimeters and onto the guard towers. Inside the SHU, a quiet tension had replaced the usual monotony. Inmates moved with calculated precision; even the smallest gesture could be a signal to a collaborator in another unit. According to internal prison reports, intelligence from previous incidents had suggested that multiple inmates were attempting to coordinate actions across the SHU, a rare but not unprecedented challenge for maximum security facilities. Inmate X, at the center of this subtle web of influence, had received another coded message the previous night. The contents were partially indecipherable, but indicated potential movements of contraband and influence among other cells. While verified records confirm that Pelican Bay inmates have historically communicated in subtle ways despite isolation, the specifics of this plan remained unconfirmed, adding a layer of unpredictability to the daily operations. Meanwhile, the SHU staff implemented heightened monitoring protocols. Surveillance cameras were checked every 30 minutes, and patrols were increased. Guards reviewed past incidents, including minor altercations in cell block D and suspicious notes under doors. Official prison reports confirmed that these interventions were standard procedure following signs of potential coordination among inmates. By mid-afternoon, the tension escalated further. Inmate Y was observed interacting subtly with a newer inmate, Inmate W, pseudonym, during recreation periods. According to news reports and internal observations, even minimal interactions can be leveraged to establish temporary alliances or relay instructions. Though no direct violations were documented, the behavior drew attention, prompting senior guards to increase surveillance in adjacent units. Inmate Z's erratic behavior continued to ripple through the SHU. Guards reported that his pacing, muttered words, and meal refusals had caused unease among nearby inmates. According to internal psychological evaluations, individuals like Z can act as destabilizers, intentionally or otherwise, influencing the mood and behavior of entire cell blocks. This created an invisible chain reaction. The SHU was a microcosm of strategy, fear, and power where even minor actions could escalate. Outside the cells, administrative staff held a brief meeting to review these developments. Recommendations included temporary isolation of high-risk inmates and increased monitoring of legal visits. While the interventions were routine, the combined effect of multiple unverified coordination attempts and mental health instability was creating an environment on the edge of chaos. Late afternoon brought a more concrete incident. In cell block B, a fight erupted between two inmates affiliated with rival gangs. This confrontation was verified in prison incident reports. One inmate sustained minor injuries, and staff intervened immediately. Although quickly contained, the fight was a reminder that even the most controlled environments could erupt unpredictably. Inmate X observed the commotion from his cell. Reports indicate he used subtle body language and coded notes to assess potential impacts on his influence. Across the SHU, other inmates adjusted their behavior, testing loyalties and alliances. According to verified accounts, Pelican Bay's gang networks have historically operated even under strict isolation protocols, proving that control measures can delay but rarely eliminate power dynamics entirely. As night approached, the atmosphere became heavy with anticipation. Guards noticed minor anomalies. A folded piece of paper slightly protruding under a door, subtle hand signals exchanged between inmates during recreation periods, and unusual movement in otherwise predictable routines. Each observation was documented for potential follow-up. While the precise intent behind these actions remained unconfirmed, the implications were clear. The SHU hierarchy was fluid, and strategic maneuvers continued to unfold beyond immediate supervision. Near midnight, a loud bang echoed from one of the isolated cell blocks, a metal tray thrown forcefully against the wall. While no injuries were reported, the event triggered a full lockdown. Guards discovered a coded message slipped beneath a cell door, referencing multiple SHU units and potential timing for coordinated action. Whether it was a real threat or an intimidation tactic remained unconfirmed, but the SHU had reached a tipping point. Something was stirring inside Pelican Bay, and the coming hours promised to test the prison's limit. The storm brewing inside Pelican Bay has reached a breaking point. Alliances are tested, secrets unravel, and the walls of the SHU hold more danger than ever. Stay tuned as the tension explodes. The morning began quietly, the Pacific fog blanketing Crescent City, but the calm was deceiving. Staff had remained vigilant overnight after the lockdown triggered by the coded note discovered in Chapter 4. According to official prison incident reports, the SHU had been on high alert for weeks, with additional surveillance hours, patrol rotations, and administrative oversight in place. Yet, as history and prior investigations show, even the tightest security measures could not completely suppress inmate ingenuity. Inmate X, ever aware of the scrutiny, began orchestrating small maneuvers designed to maintain influence without triggering direct punishment. Using legal correspondence and coded notes, he attempted to coordinate actions across multiple units. While the content of these communications remained unverified, historical court filings and prison reports confirm that high-profile inmates at Pelican Bay have consistently used creative, subtle channels to communicate with allies. Across the SHU, inmate Y and his allies were quietly consolidating power. Surveillance footage, verified by internal staff reports, indicated that small gestures, shared items during limited recreation, and strategic placement in communal areas were all being used to establish temporary hierarchies. These behaviors, while subtle, were consistent with documented patterns of inmate influence inside maximum security facilities. By mid-afternoon, tension erupted into a tangible incident. A verified altercation occurred in cell block C. Two rival gang members clashed violently, resulting in one minor injury and immediate staff intervention. According to internal reports, the fight had been preceded by subtle provocations and exchanges, gestures, coded words, and deliberate positioning of inmates. Even in isolation, the gang networks remained active, with power plays and intimidation shaping interactions. Inmate Z's erratic behavior also began to impact the broader environment. Previously considered a psychological wildcard, Z's pacing, muttering, and sporadic refusals to follow instructions created heightened anxiety among nearby inmates. Psychological evaluations noted that individuals like Z can unintentionally or deliberately alter the behavior of entire cell blocks, amplifying tension in an already volatile environment. Meanwhile, SHU staff coordinated with administrative officers to address the increasingly complex web of inmate activity. Surveillance footage was reviewed, and additional lockdown measures were prepared. According to prison procedure documents, these interventions are standard when potential coordination or unrest is suspected. Yet even as precautions intensified, the subtle communication channels, notes, gestures, and coded language continued to function, highlighting the difficulty of controlling highly resourceful inmates. As evening approached, the SHU's atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Inmate X executed another discreet maneuver. A coded note passed under a door to a trusted ally in another block. Unverified reports suggest the note contained instructions for influencing inmate behavior in multiple units simultaneously. While the content could not be confirmed, the potential for escalation was real. Staff, aware of the risk, increased patrols and surveillance rotations, but the tension inside the SHU had reached unprecedented levels. Then, just after lights out, a sudden commotion erupted near cell block D. A metallic clang echoed through the corridor as a tray was hurled against the wall. No one was physically injured, but the action triggered an immediate lockdown. According to prison logs, the event coincided with the discovery of another folded note, partially decipherable, referencing times and locations in multiple SHU units. Whether this represented actual coordination or an intimidation tactic remained unconfirmed, but it marked the peak of psychological pressure within the facility. Inmate Y, observing from his cell, recognized the stakes had escalated. The subtle alliances he had formed were being tested, and the SHU's invisible hierarchy had shifted. Inmate X's influence remained formidable, but cracks were appearing in the carefully maintained balance of power. Across the SHU, every glance, every gesture, every interaction carried weight. Even minor mistakes could have cascading consequences. The night ended with heightened alert. Guards and staff documented every movement, every note, and every unusual behavior. The SHU had transformed into a pressure cooker of strategy, fear, and potential violence, a place where even isolation could not fully suppress the human drive for control. Shortly before midnight, a small, coded message slipped beneath Cell 14's door. Its content suggested a coordinated effort that spanned nearly half the SHU unit. Whether this indicated a real plan or a bluff intended to manipulate perception remained unconfirmed, but the warning was unmistakable. Pelican Bay's SHU was on the edge, and the coming hours would determine which inmates maintained control and which would be left vulnerable. Tonight, Pelican Bay reaches the breaking point. Alliances shatter, orders are executed, and every move could ignite chaos. The SHU is a battlefield of power, fear, and secrets. Stay tuned for the truth. The night had fallen over Crescent City, casting long shadows across the razor-wire perimeters of Pelican Bay. Inside the SHU, the air was thick with tension. Inmate X, ever vigilant, sensed the shifting dynamics as rival inmates tested boundaries and new alliances quietly formed. Surveillance cameras recorded the routine patrols, but they could not capture the subtle psychological games, the hand gestures, the folded papers, the slight pauses in conversation, that defined SHU power. According to internal prison reports, the previous day's incidents had prompted the administration to implement emergency protocols. Guards increased patrols, reviewed surveillance footage repeatedly, and restricted recreation periods to minimize potential contact. Yet, despite these verified measures, the inmates' ability to influence each other persisted. News reports and court filings have historically shown that gang networks inside Pelican Bay remain active, even under extreme isolation. Inmate Y, building on prior alliances, orchestrated a minor act intended to demonstrate influence over other blocks. Using coded messages delivered via legal correspondence, he attempted to assert control over a group of younger inmates. While the specifics of these communications remained unverified, the strategy aligned with documented patterns of inmate behavior in maximum security SHUs. Meanwhile, inmate Z's erratic pacing and muttering continued to unsettle nearby inmates, a reminder that mental instability could inadvertently destabilize the entire unit. By mid-evening, verified events escalated. In cell block D, a confrontation erupted between rival inmates. One inmate threw a metal tray, striking the wall near another cell. Guards intervened immediately, separating the parties and documenting the incident. According to prison logs, no serious injuries occurred, but the altercation signaled a major shift in the SHU hierarchy. Minor incidents like these are often precursors to larger, coordinated actions within Pelican Bay, as observed in historical reports and prior investigations. Simultaneously, staff discovered multiple folded notes under various cell doors, each containing cryptic symbols or coded instructions. Whether these notes indicated an actual coordinated effort across units or were designed as intimidation tactics remained unconfirmed. The content, partially deciphered, suggested timing and unit references consistent with previous patterns of gang coordination. Guards reviewed footage repeatedly, cross-referencing movements during recreation and meal delivery times to anticipate potential escalation. Inmate X, realizing the stakes had reached a critical point, executed a calculated series of maneuvers. He adjusted his communications, strategically targeting certain inmates to reinforce loyalty while subtly undermining others. Historical investigations and court filings from Pelican Bay indicate that this kind of psychological strategy is a key factor in maintaining influence among isolated populations. Every gesture, every glance, and every coded note carried significance. In the SHU, minor errors could cascade into chaos. Meanwhile, inmate Y attempted to test the limits of authority by signaling to other blocks through brief hand gestures and objects passed subtly during limited movement. According to internal reports, these actions were quickly noticed by surveillance staff, prompting a temporary lockdown. Even so, the act demonstrated how persistent and creative inmate strategies can bypass extensive control measures. As night deepened, the SHU's tension reached its apex. Guards patrolled every corridor, while administrators monitored communications and reviewed all prior incidents. Inmates were acutely aware that every action was being observed, yet the invisible hierarchy persisted. Every folded note, coded gesture, and strategic pause played into a silent battle for dominance. The prison, designed to neutralize influence, had become a theater of strategy and subtle power plays. Late in the night, an alert was triggered when a series of notes was discovered, each referencing multiple SHU blocks and timed sequences. The potential coordination spanned nearly half of the unit. Whether this represented a genuine plan, an intimidation tactic, or merely psychological posturing remained unconfirmed, but the implication was unmistakable. Pelican Bay had reached a critical tipping point. The next hours would decide whether the SHU hierarchy remained intact, or if chaos would finally erupt. The storm inside Pelican Bay has reached its peak. Tonight, secrets are revealed, power is tested, and the SHU's invisible hierarchy faces its ultimate reckoning. Hit subscribe and don't miss the final truth. The SHU was eerily quiet as dawn approached. After several nights of heightened tension, the facility had entered a state of hypervigilance. Guards patrolled relentlessly, and surveillance monitors were checked repeatedly. According to internal prison logs, the incidents over the past days, including coded notes, minor altercations, and subtle coordination attempts, had prompted a full review of all SHU procedures. Administrators reinforced lockdowns, temporarily segregated high-risk inmates, and increased staff presence in previously quiet corridors. Inmate X, whose influence had dominated multiple blocks, was now closely observed. While his prior maneuvers demonstrated remarkable strategic thinking, the heightened scrutiny limited his ability to communicate and manipulate other inmates. Verified reports confirm that, during peak interventions, inmates' influence is often reduced, though not entirely eliminated. In the SHU, control is a constant negotiation between surveillance and ingenuity. Meanwhile, inmate Y and Z experienced the consequences of the recent escalations. Both were moved into stricter observation protocols. According to official prison records, Z was temporarily placed in a medical psychological unit to address erratic behavior, while Y was monitored continuously for potential coordination with other inmates. These interventions, while disruptive to their strategies, reinforced the prison's ability to maintain order and prevent serious violence. By mid-afternoon, the SHU began to stabilize. Guards reported no further incidents, and surveillance footage indicated that prior disruptions had not escalated into major violence. Prison reports and internal communications highlighted that while coordination attempts continued subtly, the SHU's layered security measures successfully prevented any large-scale incidents. Even the most cunning inmates were limited by the facility's architecture, procedural protocols, and staff vigilance. Yet, the psychological and strategic games continued. Inmates still used coded gestures, subtle signals, and indirect communication to maintain influence, though always within the narrow confines imposed by staff. According to news reports and human rights filings, these behaviors are common in maximum security prisons like Pelican Bay, illustrating how isolation can both suppress and intensify the subtle hierarchies that define inmate power structures. As night fell once again, the SHU seemed calm, but appearances were deceptive. Inmate X had quietly withdrawn, assessing risks and minimizing exposure. Inmate Y continued subtle coordination with no immediate consequence, while Z received treatment to manage mental strain. The facility, though tense, had successfully averted large-scale incidents, showcasing the delicate balance between control and human ingenuity inside one of the nation's deadliest prisons. The coded notes, subtle alliances, and silent strategies revealed one undeniable truth. Pelican Bay's SHU is more than a prison, it is a living ecosystem of strategy, power, and survival. Guards and administrators may maintain physical control, but the invisible lines of influence persist, proving that even in the most secure environment, human motives, loyalty, and cunning cannot be entirely contained. The storm had passed, for now, but inside the SHU, the game never truly ends. If you thought this story was intense, you're only scratching the surface of America's most dangerous prisons. Subscribe for more true crime stories, and hit the bell to uncover secrets hidden behind bars. Even after the lockdowns and interventions, Pelican Bay's SHU remains a crucible of strategy, fear, and control. Tonight, we explore what happens after the storm, and how influence persists behind bars. The morning fog once again rolled over the razor wire fences, but inside the SHU, a subtle shift had taken place. Inmate X, though monitored closely after the previous day's escalations, remained a central figure in the prison's invisible hierarchy. According to internal prison evaluations, even after strict interventions, influential inmates often find ways to maintain sway over others through coded messages, indirect gestures, and careful manipulation of younger or less experienced inmates. Inmate Y, who had been under continuous observation, began testing the limits of staff control in minor, fact-based ways. Reports indicate that he used legal correspondence and monitored recreation periods to reassert some influence, though no major incidents occurred. Historical court filings and news reports highlight that such behavior is typical in supermax prisons, demonstrating how persistent inmates adapt to even the tightest security measures. Meanwhile, inmate Z was receiving ongoing psychological support. Verified reports confirm that mental health interventions are critical in the SHU, not only for individual well-being but also for overall prison stability. Z's unpredictable behavior, if left unmonitored, could have reignited tensions, but staff ensured a structured approach that maintained both safety and order. Across the facility, staff continued monitoring for subtle signs of coordination or manipulation. Surveillance footage and logs were analyzed, showing small patterns of communication that remained unverified in terms of intent, but were enough to keep the prison administration cautious. Every gesture, note, or eye contact had potential significance in a high-stakes environment where power dynamics were constantly shifting. In the afternoon, recreation periods revealed how inmate hierarchies persisted quietly. Even in strict segregation, alliances were observed in fact-based reports, not through direct collusion, but via shared routines, body language, and indirect signals. This demonstrated the enduring complexity of human behavior in isolated environments. Control could limit action, but it could not erase influence entirely. As evening approached, the SHU's atmosphere felt taut yet stable. Guards continued their patrols and interventions, ensuring that no single unit dominated unchecked. According to internal prison documentation, these ongoing measures were essential in preventing minor incidents from escalating into dangerous situations. Inmate X, Y, and Z each adapted their strategies to this new reality, balancing influence with survival in an environment where one misstep could have serious consequences. Just before lights out, staff intercepted another cryptic note tucked under a cell door. While the content was unconfirmed, it suggested that some inmates were still coordinating subtly, maintaining influence despite maximum surveillance. The SHU had survived the immediate threat, but the invisible hierarchy, carefully constructed over years, remained intact. Inside Pelican Bay, the game of strategy, fear, and control continued, quietly shaping the lives of all who lived behind the walls. Even after lockdowns and heightened surveillance, Pelican Bay's SHU continues to shape lives in ways the public rarely sees. Tonight, we explore the lasting impact on inmates, staff, and the invisible hierarchies that define America's most dangerous prison. The morning fog lifted slowly over Crescent City, revealing the fortress-like exterior of Pelican Bay State Prison. Inside the SHU, the quiet after weeks of escalated incidents belied the subtle currents of power and influence that continued to flow. Staff reviews of surveillance footage indicated that while no large-scale incidents occurred, minor acts, folded notes, subtle gestures, and coded communications persisted. According to internal prison reports and news filings, these behaviors are consistent with patterns historically observed in maximum security isolation unit. Inmate X, still under close monitoring, had adapted his strategy to maintain influence without drawing attention. By using indirect communication through pseudonyms and coded references, he continued to exert power over select inmates. Verified reports from prison administrators indicate that such subtle influence is common. Isolation suppresses open acts of control but cannot fully eliminate hierarchical dynamics within the SHU. Inmate Y, meanwhile, leveraged the SHU's routines to test alliances carefully. During recreation and meal rotations, he observed and subtly influenced interactions, demonstrating the persistence of inmate networks even under strict control. Staff reports confirmed that these minor acts had no immediate disruptive effect but served as a reminder that isolation alone cannot neutralize all forms of influence. The psychological impact on inmates remained significant. Inmate Z, who had been under treatment for erratic behavior, showed gradual stabilization under mental health supervision. Court filings and human rights reports highlight that individuals in long-term isolation often develop coping strategies, some constructive and some manipulative, which can affect the broader SHU population. In Pelican Bay, the delicate balance between control and autonomy continued to shape daily life. From a staff perspective, officers described the ongoing challenges of maintaining vigilance. Interviews and internal records indicate that while the SHU's design limits physical interaction, guards must constantly interpret subtle cues. A glance, a gesture, or a folded note can signify emerging tensions. Training emphasizes observation, pattern recognition, and preventive action, but the unpredictable nature of inmate behavior ensures that tension is never fully dissipated. The afternoon routines revealed that the SHU's ecosystem persisted quietly but effectively. Inmates continued their daily schedules under strict surveillance, yet the unverified continuation of coded communications suggested that influence remained resilient. According to news investigations, such patterns are typical in supermax facilities. Inmates maintain psychological and strategic control in ways that cannot always be formally documented. By evening, administrators held a review of the past week's interventions. Reports indicated that while incidents had not escalated to major violence, the underlying dynamics of control, loyalty, and manipulation were still very much active. Inmates like X and Y remained central figures in this hierarchy, illustrating the complexity of managing one of the nation's deadliest isolation units. Late at night, a subtle irregularity caught a guard's eye, a folded note partially tucked beneath a cell door, referencing multiple SHU units and times. The content remained unconfirmed, but it was enough to remind staff that, even after interventions and heightened surveillance, the SHU's invisible hierarchy persisted. Pelican Bay's walls contained more than inmates. They contained strategy, influence, and a constant, unspoken game of control that would continue indefinitely. After weeks of tension, strategy, and hidden power plays, the story inside Pelican Bay reaches its final chapter. Tonight, we uncover the lasting truths behind America's most notorious prison. The dawn over Crescent City revealed a stark, silent fortress. Pelican Bay State Prison, with its towering fences and razor wire, had endured another night of high alert. Inside the SHU, inmates returned to their routines: confined cells, monitored movements, and strict schedules. According to prison administrative reports, the past weeks of heightened surveillance, lockdowns, and interventions had successfully prevented any major violent incidents. Yet the invisible networks of influence remained intact, a testament to the resilience of human ingenuity under extreme confinement. Inmate X, though now under strict observation, continued to command subtle influence over select inmates. Verified reports confirm that leaders in supermax facilities often maintain control through indirect methods, from coded correspondence to brief, legally sanctioned interactions. Even with guards aware of potential threats, these strategies demonstrate the persistence of hierarchy and power within the SHU. Inmate Y and Z also adapted to the aftermath. Y continued minor coordination, carefully avoiding detection, while Z's mental health treatment helped stabilize behavior that could otherwise destabilize the unit. According to court filings and internal evaluations, long-term interventions like these are critical for both inmate welfare and overall facility stability. Staff reflections underscored the delicate balance maintained inside Pelican Bay. Interviews and official reports indicate that guards and administrators must constantly interpret subtle cues, respond to minor incidents before they escalate, and remain vigilant against psychological manipulations. Even in a prison designed to suppress influence and prevent organized criminal activity, the human element, the capacity for strategy, loyalty, and subtle communication, remains a constant challenge. The SHU's design and protocols, solitary confinement, staggered movement, surveillance, and restricted visitation limited the risk of large-scale violence. Yet historical news reports, court filings, and human rights documents show that this containment comes at a cost. Prolonged isolation can create mental health challenges, exacerbate tensions, and foster complex, invisible hierarchies that endure over decades. By evening, Pelican Bay returned to its uneasy rhythm. Inmates were confined, guards patrolled diligently, and administrators monitored every interaction. The facility's walls, while containing physical threats, could not entirely neutralize influence, loyalty, or psychological strategy. Every note, gesture, and subtle maneuver inside the SHU contributed to a delicate ecosystem of power, constantly shifting yet remarkably resilient. The story of Pelican Bay's SHU is not one of simple control or total isolation. It is a story of human adaptation, survival, and the enduring influence of hierarchy, even behind walls designed to suppress it. Inmates like X, Y, and Z exemplify the tension between confinement and strategy, illustrating that even in America's most secure prison, power, loyalty, and cunning cannot be entirely contained. The SHU remains a crucible of control and survival, a place where history, policy, and human behavior intersect in ways both visible and unseen. If this story gave you a glimpse into the hidden world of America's most dangerous prisons, subscribe for more true crime documentaries. Hit the bell so you never miss the secrets hidden behind bars.